Recently, when I picked up Horizon Zero Dawn for the PS4, I was ecstatic to get started playing the game, as it's something I've wanted to play for a while now. It's a pretty old game too, but after the intro played, I was stuck on the title screen. Pretty weird, right? I just got the game, I'm hyped to play it, and just as I'm about to start a new game, I was met with this. Oh god, what does this all mean? What difficulty do I choose? Story difficulty? What's that? Hard? Very hard? What's the difference? I don't want this game to be too easy. But I also don't want to be stuck on a hard boss and throw my PS4 controller like a tomahawk, so let's just Google it. And what a mistake Googling it was. Some said play on hard, some said just pick normal the first time, and some even said to play on the hardest difficulty. Here's the problem. The variety of difficulty levels does allow for players to be able to fine-tune their experience to exactly how they want it. But then there's also the issue of hard mode being too easy, and then very hard being balls to the wall impossible. Let's say, to give an example, I remember playing Final Fantasy Crisis Core and being met with a difficulty select before starting a new game. Pretty standard stuff, 2 difficulties, normal and hard. Me, being the idiot that I am, I chose hard. What a mistake that was. 1-hit kills, being so underpowered compared to my enemies that missions were very difficult to complete, so it was hard to get any stronger, and boss fights that made my PSP the Sweat Station portable. I got so far in the game through sheer willpower, up until the point where you fight Sephiroth in the reactor. The first section of this boss fight is a portion where you have to deal enough damage in order to move on to the next phase, but you only have a limited amount of time because Sephiroth is slowly pushing you toward the edge of the platform. Reach the end of the platform and you lose. Now, as I said before, I was really underpowered. I had gotten through all the bosses up to that point by taking my time. I mean, sometimes the boss fights would last up to 30 minutes. There was no way I was going to be able to deal enough damage to this dude. So guess who had to start the game all the way over and select normal this time around? There's just too much of a drastic difference between the 2 difficulties. Later, I figured out that hard mode was supposed to be played on New Game Plus, not right off the bat. Difficulty levels sorta ruined my experience a bit with Crisis Core. Maybe if they had made hard mode available to you after beating the game once, it would have been better than presenting me with the option to choose hard right off the bat. Now, let's take Super Mario 64 for example. Back in the day, you're met with a press start screen, a file to select to start a new game, and boom! The game just starts. No difficulty select whatsoever. That's pretty weird nowadays, for a game to have no difficulty select. The game also starts you off outside of Peach's castle with a sign in front of you, giving you a general idea of how the controls work. After that, off you go. You can run around the outside of Peach's castle practicing triple jumps, slide kicks, wall jumps. There's even an area for you to practice how swimming works. Going to the game's first area, Bob-omb Battlefield, the first objective is to climb up the mountain to battle the Bob-omb King. Bob-omb? Bomb-omb? Oh god. Maneuvering there requires you to carefully control Mario across a bridge, avoid varying obstacles, and use a side flip to quickly maneuver around the Bob-omb King to grab him from behind. The game is allowing you to get used to its rules before ramping up the difficulty in later worlds. Tick-Tock Clock is one of the most difficult levels in Super Mario 64, requiring precise jumps in a timely manner. Otherwise, you fall all the way back down to either the beginning of the level or even lose a life in the worst case scenario. All this to allow the player to learn while playing the game to get better and better at its mechanics so that developers can progressively ramp up the difficulty the further you get into the game. And it's not just Super Mario 64 that took this approach to difficulty. Many games made in the 90s had the same approach, although some performed worse than others. Think Mega Man X, Ninja Gaiden, Donkey Kong Country, Castlevania. None of these games had an option to select the difficulty, rather attempted to increase difficulty steadily along the course of the game in a linear fashion. And honestly, this approach to difficulty can be frustrating. Some gamers could learn the game's mechanics faster than others, as less inexperienced players could become frustrated as they attempt to learn a new concept the game has introduced and continually fail to do so. I know there were plenty of moments where I continued to lose lives, to the point where the game would punish me because I was so bad. You failed this part too many times, you big dummy, now back to the start of the level for you. Learn how to play the game before you come play with the big boys. That's what the game would tell me, well, I mean, in my head at least. But this failure didn't make me give up or discourage me. Sure, I was disappointed that I had to replay through certain portions again, and I even felt like I was being unfairly punished at times. But at the end of the day, I wanted to prove the game wrong. I was good enough to get past the challenges that I was being presented with. Going back through those portions would also help me get a better grasp on the game's mechanics, as well as remembering obstacles that I needed to avoid that I got caught up in on a previous attempt. And when you finally pass that boss or beat that level you've been stuck on, there's honestly no way to describe it. You chase that feeling again and again. I mean, why do you think the Souls series is so popular? It's because it brought back that sense of achievement that was lost in the gaming industry as games became easier and easier. Now, this isn't to say that I don't enjoy a lax experience every now and then. Games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley don't have difficulty settings and are purposefully designed to be taken at your leisure. The developers don't want you to beat your head against the wall, but to sit back, relax, and take your time. If that's the sort of gameplay that the developers want to aim for, then that's totally fine, but developers need to know what identity they want their game to have. There's even another approach to difficulty that games can take without having to resort to difficulty levels. Dynamic game difficulty balancing. Big word, I know. Essentially, the game adjusts its difficulty accordingly to how well the player performs. Resident Evil 4 did this with its difficulty. Enemies would deliver greater damage and be more aggressive if the player completed areas with ease, and there would even be less ammo lying around as well, depending on player performance. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do difficulty in video games, but I do feel that getting rid of difficulty levels and approaching difficulty in either a more traditional sense or using dynamic difficulty balancing makes for a better gaming experience in general. There's definitely a fine line though, as something like The Lion King can be controller-breakingly difficult. Jeez, the amount of times I got to be adult Simba only to get hit too many times and go back to young Simba broke my heart as a kid. But then you got other games that can be like a soft breeze in the wind that just puts you to sleep with the controller in your hand. But I think that's a decision that developers need to consider when making the game. What do I want this game's identity to be? Do I want to reward the player based off a sense of accomplishment, or give them a relaxing experience? Alright, that's gonna be all for this one, guys. Make sure to subscribe or all your games will be on the hardest difficulty.